قمرون قمرون قمر سيدنا النبي قمرون وجميل وجميل.
Now just some background to the Imam first. Very brief. I don't want to make the whole lesson about the biographies, even of the narrators, rather get to the hadith. But we have to talk about Imam al-Nawawi. He was one of the greatest scholars ever known to this ummah. His name was Yahya ibn Sharaf al-Din al-Nawawi. His kunya is like a nickname given to you when you're of 7 days around that in Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Was Abu Zakaria, even though he never married and had no children, obviously. Abu Zakaria, he was known by the title Muhyiddin, the reviver of the religion, but he never allowed anybody to call him Muhyiddin because he felt that it was too ostentatious, and he didn't allow anybody to call him that, even though that's his deserved title, Muhyiddin. He never allowed anybody to call, even his own students, to call him Muhyiddin. He's known as a Nawawi because he comes from a small village in Syria known as Nawa, around about a few hours away from Damascus. It's a very small village, and he hails from that village. I have actually one honor that I was granted by Allah Jalla wa'ala, connected to Imam al-Nawawi and this text, a great blessing for me. And that was that Imam al-Nawawi studied in Damascus in mainly one particular place. And that particular place now is not a madrasa anymore. It's basically the only thing that's retained from the area is the masjid, little tiny small masjid, and next to it are a few rooms, and at the back end of it are some rooms for students from Mahad al-Fath. They stay there. My teacher, I hope that he's still alive, the Mufti of the Hanafis, Sheikh Muhammad Jum'ah. Don't confuse him for Mufti Ali Jum'ah, a different person. A great scholar, very poor man, but a very simple man. He had a little office there, and by office I don't mean a Western standard office. It was just a room with a bookshelf in it with 2 chairs. And so in that little masjid he had 2 lessons that he would teach, which I attended, which were attended by me, a few of my friends, and 3 old men from the local area. But the importance of the reason I mention it is that that actual masjid was a place that Imam al-Nawawi actually studied. It was the actual place which I gained the sharaf, and I studied in that exact place. Nobody studies there anymore because it's just a small masjid. Very few people pray there. It's a very broken down place. There are more cats in that place than there are people that pray. But I, alhamdulillah, gained the sharaf, and that place is incredibly important as well for several other reasons. One of them, according to one riwayah, one of the great ulama, if I remember correctly, Zakaria al-Ansari, when he went to that place, kissed the floor in that place because Imam al-Nawawi had studied there. So he hailed from this very small village, and some information, he was born in 631, according to the famous position in the month of Muharram, in Nawa, in that particular village, a very small village. And there's some incredibly important things about him that are narrated by especially one of his great students, of who I mentioned earlier. Luckily he related some of his miracles, Imam al-Nawawi's miracles. He was a very reserved, conservative child. One of the great stories about Imam Nawawi, that when he was a child, he memorized Al-Quran Al-Kareem. His father took him to memorize, but before that there's a story about him that there was and his own student narrates this story, that he said the Shaykh, it's narrated, I don't know if he directly narrates from the Shaykh or not, but a story that's narrated through the Shaykh one way or another, that he states that when Imam al-Nawawi was a young boy, some of the local children were forcing him to play with them, and he was running away from them. And one of the older shuyukh, he saw him, and he stopped him and he said, "Why don't you play with the children?" Very young boy, non-pubescent. And he said, Allah didn't create me to play games. So immediately he knew that there was something incredible about this boy, and he took him away to some of the ulama, and he said that you need to nurture this boy because I've got a funny feeling that he's going to be the greatest scholar of this era. So that was at a very, very young age. He memorized the Quran at a very young age, and according to some narrations, at the age of 19, his father took him to Damascus to study. Allah knows best between that time what he had already studied. His father was a great man also, as was his grandfather. They say about his father or his grandfather that they were very particular about the way he spent his time, and that they would wait when he would relieve himself as a kid. And those days they didn't have toilets. They would go out and they would take him and they would tell him to relieve himself, and his father, his grandfather would stand there making dua to Allah Jalla wa Ala that he doesn't waste any time when he relieves himself. Even they were careful even about him wasting time when he was relieving himself. And they say later one of the miracles that became manifest was that whenever Imam al-Nawawi, because he was a great author and writer, one of his miracles when he would go to relieve himself, some people saw that his pen carried on or continued to write. That Allah granted him a great karama, a great miracle to this Imam, that he would never waste even 1 minute ever. And I'm going to speak about some great feats of Imam al-Nawawi, why he's special and what differentiates him from all of the other ulama that are known. So he arrived at the Umayyad Masjid in Damascus, and in around 649 he memorized At-Tanbih in the Shafi'i school. In 4.5 months he memorized the entire book, and read the madhab of Shirazi for the rest of the year to his teacher Ishaq ibn Ahmad al-Uthman al-Maghribi al-Maqdisi. This is one of the great ulama who saw a lot of special qualities in the Imam. And he was his first teacher, this great Shaykh Ishaq ibn Ahmad al-Maghribi. He used to read 12 lessons a day with his teachers, 12 lessons. And he actually tells you which lessons he read also. So he would read from them, for instance, Ilm al-Sarf. He read Usul al-Fiqh. And one of the famous stories was that he once opened the book of Qanun, Medicine of Ibn Sina. He said, I looked at it for 1 week, and he said, I couldn't go to sleep at night. I felt darkness enter my heart, and I closed the book. So he left it, not because of the medicine, maybe because of Ibn Sina, I don't know. Because he was a very pure Imam, and that's one of the special qualities that we'll talk about. In 650, he went on Hajj with his father, and he became very ill. And they say that when he became ill, God gave him his greatest opening at this time in tasawwuf, in spirituality. Imam Nawawi himself narrates that he met Khadr alayhi salam, the companion of Musa alayhi salam, in the Quran, that Allah calls Rahmah, the mercy of God, a mercy or a servant from our servants. He narrates himself that he met him. This is the companion of Moses, mentioned in Al-Quran Al-Karim. And the awliya, it's narrated very famously that many of them met Al-Khadr, including from the Imam al-Nawawi, the great Ibn Ajiba, all of the people of Tasawwuf, Mawla al-Darqawi, Ibrahim bin Adham, all the way to the Salaf who met him, that he met Imam Nawawi had a meeting or came across Al-Khadr, or known as Khidr, or Khizar, or Khwaja Khizar, something along those lines. His name is debatable. We studied a seminar on that a long time ago. Not to repeat now. And he had a great opening at that time. In terms of his character and his description, he was... Sorry, I'm having some problems. He stayed awake most of the night. The Nawawi school, they narrate, is a very special school because Imam al-Nawawi has a special school in sleeping. They say that al-Nawawi for many years only slept 1 hour a night. So it's one of his miracles that Allah gifted al-Nawawi, that he would only sleep 1 hour in the night, and when he would sleep he wouldn't lie down, he would sleep in a sitting like this. And I myself witnessed somebody in Damascus who was on the same school as al-Nawawi, a young man from Morocco, Hassani Sayyid Maliki, who would do exactly the same. He would sleep 1 hour in the night. There was literally nothing left of him, and he would sleep sitting. He was a very, very special man. I only met him a couple of times. One of my friends, he kept him over in the night time just to see what he was all about, because it was a rumor going around, there's this guy, and he said it was absolutely true. And some of the ulama, there was a famous thing about, especially the people of Tasawwuf, some of them would never sleep on their backs. In fact, Sheikh Abdul Kabir narrated to me in the fahas of his father, Mawla Hashim al-Bilgithi, Allah increase him, in Meknes, that one of their own teachers, Haj Ibrahim, never slept on his back. He said, I accompanied the Shaykh as a boy. He said he would sleep like the following. He said he would sleep like this. He would hold his knees like that, and they would strap something around himself, and he would sleep like that every single night. And he was a man of great compassion. So he would sleep very uncomfortably, and now we stayed mainly in the masjid and slept in a little room that they had given him in the masjid. And he slept very little. He stayed most of the night, if not all of the night. Some of the special people of Allah Jalla wa Ala from the Bishr al-Hafi were people who slept very, very little. Very little they slept. It's not a normal thing. It's a very rare thing. Only some of the people are granted in this ummah. Sometimes you can count them. They're within maybe 100 people maybe. Allah knows best. Abu Hanifa was one of them also. He was very, very strict on his diet and very, very strict on leaders. He was vehemently against sitting with politicians. Imam al-Nawawi never visited them. In fact, Malik Baybars, if you're familiar with him, he met Imam Nawawi once. But they say that one of the king, Al-Zahir, met Imam al-Nawawi and he wanted him to count. So Imam Nawawi dressed in patched clothing. He only had a few pairs, he would patch them. And he would have a very small turban, just a humble turban. And when they heard about him, so when they called him, the king called him, or the leader, and Imam Nawawi came to look at him, and people would belittle him because they looked like, a faqir. And so he wanted him to sign some edict, a fatwa. And Imam Nawawi looked through them, and he said, I'm not going to sign these. And the Imam said, the king said, why won't you? He said, because it contains scandalous oppression. And then the king said to his workers, he said, sack him right now. They said, Sayyidi, he doesn't have a job anyway. He's got no position. He's not the mufti. And then he just let him go because he held no position, Imam Nawawi, for the government. So they couldn't touch him. Some say he never drank the water of Damascus because he felt the ruler at that time was corrupt. So he drank from somewhere else. Or a well or something like that. He never drank from the official supply basically. He never ate fruit in his entire life. Never ate fruit, Imam Nawawi. And I'll mention a story about that. They say that the food that he ate, back to his diet, his students never liked when Imam Nawawi said to them, please eat with me. Because the food that he ate was very difficult to eat. So it wasn't a happy day when they were sharing food with the Imam. They say before he died, he wanted to taste fruit because he had never eaten fruit before. That he sent somebody to get an apple for him, and by the time they got back, he was close to Sakarat al-Maut, the last point, and he refused it, and he passed away. And then he visited one of his students in his dream, and he said, Allah forgave me and granted me Jannah, and after which he gave me an apple. So it's one of the great stories of the Imam. He wrote several books, and the books that he wrote were not many, but they were very special. He wrote, for instance, one of the greatest commentaries ever written on Sahih Muslim. He wrote that. He wrote Al-Irshad. Also he wrote Al-Taqrib al-Taysir fi Ma'rifat Sun al-Bashir al-Nadhir. He wrote Tahdhib al-Asma wal-Lugha. At-Tibyan also fi Adab al-Hamd al-Quran. You can get it. It's a small book on the etiquette of Quran. Minhaj al-Talibin, Bustan al-Arifin, Khulas al-Ahkam, fi Mahma al-Sunan wal-Qawaid al-Islam, Rawdat al-Talibin, al-Umda, wa Umda al-Muftiin, Riyad al-Salihin, which is famous, and the Nawawiyah. And he wrote also the Kitab al-Adhkar. So he wrote very many books. Some say he didn't reach the age of 40, he passed away before 40. Others say mid-40s. Others say he reached 50. The more famous being that he died on the 24th of Rajab, 686, in his hometown. One of the special great miracles of his death was that there are two variations to the story. That before he died, he said to them that only build a very small grave for me. And when they attempted to build slightly higher, that Allah caused a tree to grow from his grave. You can see it now. If you look at the tree growing from his grave, literally out of his grave. It's humongous, the trees. And they say there's no tree like it in the earth. The other is that some people attempted to destroy his grave, and God caused for a tree to grow from his grave. Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best. But there is definitely a humongous tree growing directly out of his grave, which you'll never see. You'll never see a grave I'm not talking about a plant. The tree is, I don't know if you've seen it, it's a huge tree growing from the middle of Nawawi's grave. You see? You know, they say that if foliage or there's plantation growing from a person's grave, that it gives rahmah to the Nawawi has a tree, you know, coming from his grave. I mean, Allah left a sign for the ummah. And they say that they mourned him over more than 600 houses. That's how famous he was in that time. And what's very important for me anyway is that Imam Nawawi never married. He had never married. He knew very few people. He lived in the masjid all of his life in one room. He had maybe 3 pairs of clothes. He had no money. He had no fruit. Some say he never ate meat. Some say he very rarely ever touched meat. He was very conservative, talked to very few people, wrote very few works. Yeah, we're sitting in the Lake District in Cumbria about to read his work, which shows you how his work was accepted in the heavens by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hundreds of thousands of ulama wrote works on 40 hadith. But everybody knows, if you say 40 hadith, every person will tell you, if he's worth his cloth that he's wearing as a student of knowledge, that the first book that comes to mind is the 40 of An-Nawawi. And we're going to go into why that is the case, inshallah.